Right, welcome. Long break we had for a very, very long time. Some of you wondering why I dress a little differently, because this is a leadership course. It's not just a course for, I want you to know that this course is to be a leader. This jacket I'm wearing has a crest on it. That crest has, you can't see the words, but there's a 1970 under there. And that is what I wore in 1970 as I led my college, the King Edward VII College of Medicine team into winning a whole lot of matches. All right, leadership is about influencing people to be the best that they can be. So this leadership course is not just for pastors leading a church; it's for NGOs, etc. So I hope that this course will be a blessing. Can I have anything? Yeah, so sorry, I'm a bit disorganized today, just came back and I'm always apologizing for being disorganized, but I promise to be better in the times ahead. Now, what we're going to do in this leadership course is basically not a leadership course in the normal sense of the word, right? The normal sense of the word, a leadership course, all right, is basically a leadership course, and it leads to having, the world is full of leaders. It's not a short of leaders. The world is not short of leaders. The world is short of good leaders, right? There's so many bad leaders that lead countries into chaos. It leads companies into chaos, all kinds of things, right? But today, I want you to focus on the fact that we are going to do servant leadership, right? And this is something very, very different, right? So there's no shortage of leadership training, but we want to be servant leaders. So that's our goal in this whole series. Now, typically when people talk about leadership, they talk about four things: our capacity, our competency, our character, our courage. And the truth is, right, in the church, we need to have all these four. In NGOs, we need to have all these four in huge amounts. Because the hardest kind of leadership is in a church or an NGO, simply because we lead volunteers. They don't need to follow us if they don't want to. It's up to them. So unless you're a leader, a real leader with influence, you have very few followers. Pastors always tell me this. I can never find people to help. There's so little committed Christians in the church. We have so many people in the church, but none are committed, simply saying, we don't have enough volunteers. Every time I want someone to commit to something, they're not there. They just come for Sunday service. NGOs, always, perpetually short of workers. Never have enough workers because they're volunteers. They come when they're free, right? And if they don't like your leadership, they don't come. Simple as that, okay? So, in our type of leadership, servant leadership, in our types of organizations, NGOs, or in churches, we need all these four in high amounts: your capacity, your competency, your character, your courage. Now, are these born or learned? Are these something you get gifted by God, or are you trained to get more capacity? So some people say, are leaders born or leaders trained? Now, if you look at the four, you obviously will come up with the same answer. They are both born and learned. What is capacity? Capacity is basically the amount you can do. Some people have an amount of strength, stamina, very good capacity for physical things. But if you train more, you have more capacity. Some are born with very weak physical bodies. When you train, you have more capacity to work hard. So it's born and learned. Some have poor memory. Some are born with amazing memory. But if you can learn methods how to increase your memory capacity becomes more. So is it born or learned? It's both. If you're born with the great capacity, then you don't need to work so hard to add to it. But you're born with low capacity, you work hard, but you can also catch up, so to speak. Competency, skills. Some people are very skilled in personal relationships. They're just born in a friendly way. Some people have to work hard to be competent in personal relationships. Some people are naturally skilled in music. Some people have worked very hard to become more musical. But it's both, born and learned. Then we see character. Character. Some people are generous. Some people are selfish. But it can be taught. Selfish people, when they know the Bible, when they trusted Jesus, have more character, more generosity, right? So we can go on to sing with courage. So are they born or are they learned traits? Is it nature or nurture? It's both. Okay, so the purpose of leadership training is to increase your capacity, your competency, your character, and your courage to do things, right? Now, of these four, which is the most important? Now, in leadership training in the world, you know what we call secular leadership training, mostly they do not talk of the third one, character. Almost always they try to train your capacity, your memory, your hard working, to be more diligent, your competency. They train you in a lot of competencies. They train you to go out and get it. But they do not focus on the third one. To me, our training, the most important is the third one, character. Now, if you're a leader with bad character, dishonest, you can cheat lots of people. Your followers will be cheated. If you're a leader who's selfish, boy, you could get millions of people to slave for you. They work for you, and then you could deceive them in the end and give them nothing. So character is by far the most important trait in leadership, servant leadership especially, right? So our focus is on character. And today we're going to begin with the character of a servant, okay? So we start with that. That's the basis of all our leadership training. Now, after we learn this servant leadership, then we go on in subsequent weeks into the laws of leadership. According to John Maxwell, he's the guru of leadership in our Christian circles. John Maxwell has beliefs there are 21 laws. Of course, there's no limit. It's not like the 10 commandments. But I would not do all the 21 laws of leadership. I will do many of them because they're very useful. The laws of influence, the laws of lid, that, you know, some leaders have a lid on them. They can't get beyond how to break those lids. So things like that, okay? So after today, we move into the laws of leadership. I will try to use Bible examples, right? Characters in the Bible. For example, Saul, David. Watching how these two people, all right, how they started. Saul started well. He was a tall man. He was everybody chose him. David started the reject. Nobody wanted him. Even his father didn't offer him to be the king. He was a little boy, right? But how he removed lids from him, and then he became the giant, and Saul became the dwarf, right? In leadership. So this is what we're going to do in the subsequent weeks. But today, we're going to do a servant's heart. How can we be a servant leader? And the only way is to begin with a servant's heart. And of course, the best Bible example, the best case study is the master himself, the master servant, the one who came to serve, all right, to serve us. From his beginning, he left heaven to serve us, and he went to the cross. On that cross, he was still serving us, okay? Now, if you look at the Bible, you'll find the word leader. It's funny, you know, in leadership training, we talk about leaders. In the Bible, the word leader is only found 9 times. The word servant is found over 600 times in the Bible. And yet, even in many Christian circles, we have leadership training rather than servant leadership training. To me, 9 and 600 is a huge gap between the two, right? And so how do we learn about servant leadership? We could look at Jesus' life and say, I can learn it. It's very easy. All his life was servant leadership. Look at it. Every day, what did he do? He went and he did miracles. What was he doing? He was serving. The sick, he healed them. That was serving. The blind, he healed the blind. The leper, he healed. That he was serving. They had needs. They had needs. There was sickness. Demon possessed, he cast out the demon. He was serving them. The hungry, he fed them. He was serving them. The lonely, he touched. He was serving them. The rejected woman, the woman who people want to stone, he showed love. That's what she needed, not rejection. Jesus was serving all the time. In fact, his entire life was servant leadership. But for many Christians, they don't quite get it. They will say, I can't heal people like that. I can't make the blind see. So what am I supposed to do? Or they will say, I can't cast out demons. I've never done it before. And if I met a demon-possessed person, I don't know what to do. That's beyond me. Or someone will say, I never saw a leper. How could I even work with a leper? Or another one said, hey, I don't even know about a prostitute. How could I forgive her or help her? You see, so when people see Jesus' life, they see there's something separate. It's like, oh, okay, he was doing all these amazing things. So that's for Jesus. But for me, how does all those things he has been doing for 3 years, day in, day out, being serving in these amazing ways, how is that related to me? To be a servant, to serve in my leadership. So, at the last night of Jesus' life, he was going to wrap up everything that he had done. He had demonstrated for 3 years servant leadership. But then he still didn't get it. On the last night, he was going to demonstrate it in a very simple way that anyone who understands that lesson will understand the 2 principles of servant leadership. All right, we're going to see the 2 principles in a moment. Okay, so we're going to John chapter 13, which is what we call the Last Supper. Right? And you know, at the Last Supper, Jesus ate with his disciples, then he washed their feet, and then he taught them all the things that he had been teaching. He summarized it. All right? So John 13 to John 17 is all about this Last Supper. Okay? And it's lesson after lesson. But I want you to see the first lesson he taught by what I call a practical demonstration. Right? It's only one part. Jesus always taught in stories, parables. But this time, he was going to do I will use the word a skit for that. A very useful skit. A very useful drama presentation with an amazing lesson in it. Right? So let's look at John 13, verse 1 to 7. Now, always remember, this is the last night of Jesus' life. And the last night of a man's life, he wants to tell his disciples, if you're a father, you're going to tell your children, everything that you wanted to teach them all the life, from the time they were babies till they were big, you wanted to teach them lessons, you would summarize it before you die. All right? So here was Jesus summarizing the lessons of life for us. John 13, verse 1 to 7. Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour was come that he should depart out of this world unto the Father, having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. And supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hand, and that he was come from God and went to God, he rises from supper, laid aside his garments, took a towel, and girded himself. After that, he poured water into a basin, began to wash the disciples' feet, to wipe them with a towel wherewith he was girded. Then cometh he to Simon Peter, and Peter said unto him, Lord, dost thou wash my feet? Jesus answered and said unto him, What I do thou knowest not now, but thou shalt know hereafter. Right? And then we go on to verse 12. So after he had washed their feet, it's not on the notes, but maybe it is. Let me just check whether it's on the notes. Yeah, okay. So after he had washed their feet and had taken his garments and had sat down and was set down again, he said unto them, Know ye what I have done to you? Ye call me Master and Lord, and ye say, Well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, ye ought also to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Verily, verily, I say unto you, the servant is not greater than the Lord, than his Lord, neither he that is sent greater than he that sent him. If ye know these things, happy are ye if ye do them. All right. So we see here this little passage on how the Lord has washed the disciples' feet. Okay. Now there are many lessons that when people ask you, what was Jesus trying to demonstrate? Almost everyone will say Jesus was trying to demonstrate humility. He was trying to show how humble he is. Right? Now, for me, that is not an adequate answer. It's a good answer, but it is not adequate. Now, if Jesus was just trying to demonstrate humility, I can tell you this, the Buddhists do better than Jesus. I mean, many of you know Buddhists, monks and nuns, what they do is they walk barefooted, they shave their head, they carry a begging bowl, and they walk around every morning for years begging for rice. Now, I don't think they're short of rice. Many of these monks are not poor, they're actually very rich. But the reason why they do that is to demonstrate humility. Now, I think that's much more, their demonstration is definitely more powerful than once a lifetime you wash somebody's feet. Imagine every day, I'm a monk, I'm 60 years old. I'm the chief monk of 100 monks. I have to walk around barefooted, shaven head, and going back for rice. Now, to me, that's much more humbling. What about another religion, the Hindus, the holy men? They really don't even wear clothes to show how humble they are. Some don't eat. They fast. They're so scrawny. It's kind of scary. Now, I think that's a lot more humble. If Jesus was just trying to say, hey, I'm the most humble Savior, I say Jesus didn't do such an amazing job. Because others outdid him in terms of humility. So, when you see the Pope, for example, washing feet once a year, washing the cardinal's feet, that's okay. I mean, it's quite a mark of humility. But, here's the cardinal, nicely dressed. He's not even barefooted. He's not even bald. He's well-fed. And he's going to wash feet. Is that humility? I think Jesus was trying to teach us something far more than that. Right? So, I want you to now just watch a few things in this story, and then I'll tell you what Jesus was demonstrating. Okay? Number one, how to wash someone's feet. Now that takes humility. I don't like to wash someone's feet because normally the act of washing someone's feet is to show you are lower than that person, right? Now, for many of us to do any act that makes us feel lower than someone is very difficult. I lose my dignity. I lose my position. I lose my respect from people if I do something very low. And therefore, when we are faced with the challenge of doing something very low, what do we normally do? We try to avoid it. Because I don't want to lose my dignity. I don't want to lose my position. I don't want to lose my respect in society. So, how can we overcome this challenge, this fear of doing something lowly? Jesus showed this very clearly. Verse 3 in this passage we read states a fact that to me is obvious. Why is it even put in this passage? Jesus, knowing, verse 3, that the Father had given all things into his hands, that he was come from God and went to God. You mean Jesus didn't know that until now? I mean, he knew that all along. He was from God. He's going back to God. He's a child of God. He's a son of God. He is everything the Father has is his. He is co-equal with God. Why is that put down in this passage? Out of the blue book, instead of narrative, it states a fact. Because unless you and I know our true identity, our eternal identity, our identity is not our position in society. That can go up and down. Our identity is not respect from people. Sometimes people respect us and sometimes they don't. Those things move up and down with life. Our identity is something solid. Nobody can take from us. I am a child of God. All things the Father has are mine because I am his and he is mine. That's what the Bible tells us. Now, unless you know that, unless you're very clear on what I call your true identity, you always worry about your present identity. If I do this, what would they think? What would people say of me? They will think I'm just a nobody. You see, we always worry about our present identity. We forget our true and eternal identity. If you don't have this clear in your mind, you don't know, you're not sure. You're 100% a child of God. Everything God has is yours. You're from God. You're a child of God, you're going back to God. My friend, every time you want to be asked to volunteer to do something lowly, you would calculate, how will it affect my identity? All right? So you got to get this clear. You cannot be a servant leader until you know your identity in Christ. That's why non-believers cannot be servant leaders. They don't want to be servant leaders. Why do I want to be a servant? I work so hard in school to rise up. I work hard in society to get more respect. I work to go up and then you ask me to go down. I lose it all. Ridiculous, right? For us as believers, this is critical if you want to serve God, right? Now, so willingness to be a servant first comes when we are confident of identity as a child of God. There's no other way. Otherwise, you'll avoid being a servant. Now, let's get the context of this story. They wash feet. So, for most Christians, Jesus washed feet. And you know, the typical picture in most Christians' mind is all the disciples were sitting on chairs around a long table, because we all sit on chairs to eat nowadays, right? And Jesus was just demonstrating humility. There was no real need to wash feet. It was like, oh, out of the blue, Jesus said, I think I better demo some humility. I better show humility. So he figured out, okay. I better get a basin and then show them how humble I am. For most Christians, it was like, okay, that's what Jesus did. But I want you to have the context of the story, okay? In the time of Jesus, people did not wear shoes. People wore sandals. Sandals, when you walk on the road, your feet tend to get dirty because it's not covered. In the time of Jesus, people walk on paths, not on what we call normal roads. Some roads, military roads, in the time of Jesus, Roman roads were built by the Roman soldiers to bring people from one city, soldiers from one city to another. But other than those Roman roads, the other roads were paths, what you and I will call dirt roads. And in the times of Jesus, dirt roads were not just for people, they were for bringing animals from one place. Sheep had to look for pasture. They walked from one place to another. So typically a shepherd would have 100 sheep, 50 sheep, 200 sheep. He walked in front and 200 sheep would walk behind. In other words, the road was not just used by humans, but more by animals. Because for every human, there were many animals following. Okay? So when the sheep walk, they drop their dung as they walk. Sheep don't have what we call toilet habits, they just drop it along the way. So as they walked on the path, they dropped dung. Are we getting the context? The people are walking with sandals, the dirt road is dusty, and it's got dung there. And then when people walk at night, particularly, there are no lights, absolutely none, not a single light. Because it's not a time of electrification. So it was total darkness, and honestly, you didn't know what you were stepping on. You just walked. You don't like, oh, where do I walk? You don't do that because it's dark anyway. You just walk. What's the difference? You can't see anyway. So you just you walk, and then at the end of it all, you reach the house. And on that night, when Jesus was having his Last Supper, the Bible tells us in Matthew, Jesus had nowhere to have the Last Supper. So he borrowed a house. He borrowed a place for the Last Supper. So in other words, the host said, use my house, and the host vacated the house for the disciples to use. Now, typically, when people reach a house, they could not enter the house until their feet were washed. That's like normal. You cannot walk into a house with unwashed feet. That's like totally bad manners, unthinkable, right? Even today in the Middle East, if you go to a mosque, you wash your feet before you go in, even if you wash shoes, part of the culture they have. You cannot enter a mosque to pray unless you wash your feet. So what I'm going to show you is, in a typical house, right, there would be water pots. These were, before you enter the house, you would wash your feet. But you normally did not wash your feet yourself. The slaves wash your feet. Now, in the time of Jesus, slaves were abundant. Romans often, for one Roman, there were often 5, 6 slaves in the house because they conquered territory. When you conquer territory, you conquer slaves, right? And so, the lowest slave in that house was usually asked to do the lowest job, which was washing dirty feet of people coming in. The higher slaves were doing things like taking care of the children in the house, cooking the food for the master to eat. But the lower slave did what we call the non-skilled dirty job of washing someone's feet. So typically, when people went to someone's house, the lowest slave would come out. They don't even dress properly because they're low slaves. High slaves dress properly. Low slaves, you could tell by the way they dress, very simple, a loincloth, and they just wash your feet. But on that night, when Jesus' disciples reached the home, there was no host. It was vacated for them. So all the disciples reached his house, and then everyone was wondering, who is going to wash our feet tonight? Where is the host? And no host came, no slave came out. And so nobody wanted to be volunteer as the lowest slave. The disciples in their mind said, why should I be the one to wash the other disciples' foot? We're same status, why should I bring myself down? So on the night, what happened was they went in the house with dirty feet. All right, when we think dirty feet, we'll probably have a slightly different picture, but in the time of Jesus, dirty meant dirty, all right, because of the context in which they lived, the long distances they walked, the paths they walked on, and so on. All right, so imagine having those feet and you walk into someone's nice house, his guest room. You say, wow, that's pretty bad. Now, if you had that kind of feet and you walked into a restaurant and ate, you would be embarrassed. But that's okay, it's under the table. Most people don't look under the table. But one problem, in the time of Jesus, they did not eat on chairs. Chairs, as you and I know it, were invented much later. I mean, if you're Filipino, you probably know in your grandfather's house, great-grandfather's time, there were no chairs. We ate on the floor, we slept on the floor, all right? In Malaysia, it's the same. In Singapore, long, long ago, it was the same. Everybody was on the floor. But the Roman style, when you are high class, it's not a chair. Their furniture was called a triclinium, which is tables put or platforms put in a U shape. I hope that picture will help you a little bit. A U shape, right? The middle part of the U, the servant would come in and bring food, right? And people did not sit with their feet under them. The people sat with their feet on the platform. In fact, they didn't sit. They reclined. They did like this. And they ate with their hands. Typically, they did not eat rice. They ate bread. So the bread was broken. They put the bread in the gravy and they ate the bread. One hand leaning, one hand eating. Right? Now look at the feet. Imagine the dirty feet up there. Nice cloth, platform, and you got mud all over. Can you concentrate? Can you feel unembarrassed? Whatever is going on in the table, you are still very troubled by your dirty feet. But nobody wanted to volunteer to be the washer, so everybody had dirty feet that night. So Jesus allowed the supper to go on. Everybody probably didn't enjoy the supper because they were, what am I doing in my dirty feet on this platform? I never eaten like this before. My mother would scold me. I'm breaking every rule of society. But anyway, I'm not going to be the one to wash feet. Why should I be the lowest paid? No way, man. Right? So everybody ate and pretended to be comfortable. So when supper was over, the Bible tells us, all right, so just to confirm with you that this was the way they ate, you see that in verse 23 and verse 25 of the same passage, two verses that troubled me when I first was a young believer. I was wondering why when they're eating supper, one of the disciples was leaning on Jesus' bosom. That's kind of weird. I mean, if you sit in a chair and someone sits in the chair next to you, you don't put your head there and lean on that guy's bosom. It's like, what are you doing, man? Right? It's weird. And then verse 25 says, he then lying on Jesus' breast says unto him, Lord, who is it? It's like, how's that so? If I'm thinking of people sitting in chair eating a nice meal, and then somebody's head comes and leans on me, like, hey, excuse me, can you move your head a little bit? I'm trying to eat, right? But if you see the picture that we just saw, can you imagine? All right, everybody's there. One guy is there, one guy, and then if I want to talk to you, I just lean back like that. Right? When I lean back, I'm where your chest is. Hey, who are you talking about? Right? That's how I would talk to you. I just lean back. I lean on you because your head is there, my head's here. I want to talk to you, I just lean. I don't want others to hear, I just lean. All right? So when we see these two verses, and you think people are sitting down, you think very weird. These guys are strange people that are no, it's very normal. Leaning on someone's breast to talk in a dinner table when you didn't want others to hear was how you just leaned and said, hey, who are you talking about? Who's this guy that's going to betray us? You know? So that is what happened that night. Now, so supper was over, and Jesus was going to begin what I would call the last message to his disciples. Verse John chapter 14, 15, 16, 17. Wow, plenty of lessons. Summary. But Jesus knew they cannot concentrate if I teach them all these things because they'll keep thinking of their feet. You know, when you want to concentrate, you cannot be distracted by something troubling. And they were troubled by their dirty feet. So what did Jesus do? What did Jesus do? Jesus stood up, took off his clothes, just in his inner wear, as a lower slave would dress. Lower slaves did not have robes. And then Jesus, just like a slave, took the basin, a good towel around himself, and then went around and washed feet. So when washed feet, it was not Jesus under the table, but I hope you can see the picture here. He was behind them. Can you see that? Not under the table, all right? He was behind. He walked behind each one and just washed their feet. All right? That's what he did. So I'm leaning like that, eating food, and my feet are just there on the platform there, and someone's washing my feet. So Jesus did just that. And then Jesus said something very strange. He said, "What I do, thou knowest not now, but thou shalt know hereafter." What do you mean I do not know what you're doing? I know what you're doing. You're washing my feet. That's a stupid statement. What I do, thou knowest not. Of course I know. You're washing my feet. What Jesus meant is, you don't know the full meaning of what I'm doing. You think I'm just being humble, but you should know that I'm doing more than that. There are lessons to learn. All right? Now, so let's go on to the rest of the chapter. So after he washed their feet and taken his garments and was sat down again, he said unto them, "Know ye what I have done to you?" He asked again, "Do you understand what I did to you?" Again, the question is very strange. If you ask me that, I would say, "I know what you did. You washed my feet." Right? But there was a lesson that was much less obvious. I think the disciples said, "No, Jesus, I understand what you did. You washed my feet. You showed me how humble you were." That is obvious. But the lesson of meeting needs is less obvious. What do I mean by this? The lesson of meeting needs. So I want to express to you two things that make up servant leaders. One, they are willing to humble themselves to help someone. I'm willing to serve whatever it takes. That's lesson number one. I'm willing to humble myself and do anything. But there's another lesson. I have first to find what are the needs. I mean, what's the point of just being humble like a monk, shaving my head, walking around every day? Or what's the point of being a holy man and being clothless and scrawny just to show I'm humble, to show I'm willing to sacrifice and serve? What's the point? Everything you do must not be for show that you are humble, but must be a blessing to others. So the lesson of meeting needs is less obvious. Why? Why do I say that? When Jesus was healing the sick, that's obviously a need. They're sick. So I meet the need. But as a Christian, watching that, I say, I can't do that. Then Jesus cast out demons. I said, that's a need. The guy is demon possessed, but I can't cast out demons. And then he feeds the hungry. He does a miracle. I can't do that. You see, so my point is this. Every day Jesus was demonstrating two things. He looked for needs, and he willingly did what he could to meet those needs. All right? So servant leadership is just two principles. When you see a need, serve it. Even if it is embarrassing, even if it's costly, even if it makes you look low, and just meet the need. And Jesus chose the best of all on that night. Everybody can wash feet. Nobody can say, hey, I don't know how to cast out demons. Hey, I cannot heal the sick. Hey, I can't do this. I can't be a great preacher. Hey, I can't be a great leader. Let me tell you. Which Christian can say, I can't wash your foot? I hope you're with me. Jesus chose the lowest, simplest act. You disciples, after years watching me, 3 years I taught you how to be a servant leader. And you still don't understand the principles of servant leadership. There's a need. All of us had this need tonight, but nobody wanted to meet the need. All of us could have met that need, but none of us volunteered to do it. That's Christianity today. People go to church. Newcomer comes to church. Obviously, I'm lonely. I'm lost. Nobody says a word to that newcomer until the welcome time. Let's have a welcome song, and then everybody shakes his hand. And after that, when church is over, everybody talks in their little groups. Leave the poor fellow with a need, embarrassed, alone, lost in the crowd, and nobody even meets his need. It's a very simple need. Go up to him and say, "Hi, are you here? Are you alone? This is your first time here?" And be friendly. And say, "Let's go for lunch," because everybody else is going for lunch. But nobody. You don't see that in Christian churches. We can talk about leadership, we can talk about servant leadership, but it's all about high things, you know? Wow, you do this great thing, you do that great thing for God. No, washing feet was the simplest thing, the simplest believer, the simplest person, the lowest slave could do. No skills, no high capacity, high competency, high courage, high character needed. It was very simple. If you can't even do this, how can you be a servant leader? All right, so I hope that this lesson on Jesus will teach us the basic 101 of student leadership, servant leadership. It is looking for needs. In your office, see someone struggling with work. That's a need. Poor person can't keep up his work. Help. See the coffee lady being harassed. Too many orders same time. Go and help. In your society, see someone, an old lady with a basket, go and carry it. That's servant leadership. It's not about high things. Washing feet is low things. But that's what it's all about. All right, so when you come to this course on leadership, don't think how to be a Napoleon, a Hitler, a big guy, right? It's about being willing to see a need around you and meet the need. It can be around your house, your mother. Maybe she's got a lot of work that day. Mom, I washed the dishes today. Relax, Mom, I'll take over. Maybe your cousin has got 3 kids and struggling with the 3. Go volunteer and take the kid out for a walk or whatever. All right? The simplest needs, meet them. That is servant leadership. The key word is willing to serve where there is a need. You see, a servant who just pretends to work irritates me. I once had a helper in my house, right? She was very hardworking and wanted to impress me all the time. I would come down for breakfast in the morning and she would put my plate, my fork, my spoon, everything for me. Now, I always told her every morning, I said, you know, don't worry about these things. I like to do it my own way. I like to, you know, I like to take my own cup, everything. But she insisted on doing it for me every single day. I didn't want it. She did it. Now, I found that not good service. I found it irritating. Right? Sometimes you go to a restaurant and you just want to have quiet time with the person you're talking, and the waiter comes every 2 minutes and say, "Sir, how can I help you?" I said, "You can help me by not coming and disturbing me." Are you with me? All right? So serving is not about just showing service, but finding a need. Right? If there's no need, don't offer service because you are irritating someone. So here was a need. The feet need to be washed. It was dirty. So wash it. It's not that Jesus just had nothing else to do. They had clean feet, perfectly clean. You know, in some churches, they have foot washing. The guy's foot is perfectly clean because, you know, the pastor is going to wash his feet this morning. Even went for manicure the day before. And then on that morning, on that special morning, the pastor comes and washes his clean foot. For what? That's a waste of time and energy. Just to show my congregation I'm humble. That's dumb. Right? The world is full of needs. There are no end of needs. You say, wow, our country is very rich. Rich countries have lonely people. Rich countries have people who have all kinds of problems. Poor people have problems. Rich people have problems. Middle class people have needs. Everybody has needs. Find a need, meet the need. Be willing to come alongside and meet the need. All right? So let's look here at the verse. If you know these things, happy are ye if you do them. I'm sorry. For I've given you an example that you should do as I've done. Don't go around wash feet. Jesus did not give us an act to follow. An act is, I do this, please do this. It was an example, just one example of meeting a need. If all your friends have clean feet, please don't go and wash their feet. Maybe they have lonely hearts. Help their hearts. Example is different from please do this. Okay? So we're not asked to wash another's feet in the act of washing feet. It's the example. What is the example of what? Of meeting needs, even if it is a lowly, embarrassing thing to do. All right, go on. If you know these things, happy are ye if you do them. Interesting, the word happy doesn't happen many times in the Bible. The truth is, we're all looking for happiness in the wrong places. We look for happiness in possessions, in experiences. Wow, I traveled to this place. Wow, I ate this food. Wow, I own this thing. I'm so happy because I have it. You know what? All those things give you very short-lived pleasure. But when you do something to help someone in need, you have a satisfaction that you cannot explain. That's why philanthropists, very rich people, give up their business to do philanthropy. But those who don't give up their business to do philanthropy get richer and richer and lonelier, and one day they take pills and die, or they hang themselves. Because they thought in having more things and experiences, they will have more happiness, and they never found it. And they go higher and higher and found less and less happiness. And one day they said, what is life all about? They hang themselves. You don't find happiness by possessions. You find happiness by helping someone with a need. I can tell you that joy that you will have by helping a poor kid get a meal, you cannot explain. You cannot explain. Helping a poor mother, comforting her when she has lost something, a child or something, you cannot explain. Just putting your arm around her, praying with her, you cannot explain. Happy are ye if you do these things. All right? I want you to know Jesus did it even to Judas. Judas was there. He knew what Judas was going to do. He said, one of you here will deny me, and he washed his feet too. All right? So let's look at two types of leadership. The normal leadership in the world is called command leadership. It leads to fear. Do this. I'm telling you, please do it now. Now. It leads to fear. Servant leadership leads to love. You serve somebody. The result is that person loves you because you have met his needs. Command leadership leads to temporary obedience. I'm fearful of you, so I obey you. But the moment you turn your face, I'm not going to obey you. Why should I? You're no more around to scare me. Servant leadership leads to joyful obedience. When you love someone, you want to obey that person. You want to please that person. You see, if you want to be a real leader, you want to influence people, right? You have to be a servant leader. Leadership is nothing more than influence. Jesus died 2,000 years ago. His influence lives on and on and on. At the time of Jesus, Caesar was the powerful man. Who is Caesar now? I don't know. I don't care. Herod was a powerful king. Who is Herod? Nobody cares. Pilate was the governor. Who is he? Nobody cares. They led by fear. They had command leadership. They are forgotten. They are inconsequential in the realm of leadership. Jesus was a servant. His influence lives on and on. So today, I ask you a question. Do you want to be a real leader? Then you need influence. How will you get influence over people? By impressing them? By commanding them? Or by serving them? The choice is yours. Today, I hope you understand. I hope you go back and read and realized Jesus taught the master lesson of all. The simplest need. So low that people didn't even think it's got anything to do with leadership. Washing of foot is leadership? What in the world is that? All right? You can't tie up washing a dirty, muddy foot with leadership. It's almost like two separate things. But that's what Jesus did all his life. Just meet needs. And 2,000 years later, we still talk of Jesus and his influence on us and on the world. God bless you, my friends. May you be good servant leaders.